The girl, only 3 years old, could hear the voices of spirits, and by 6, she could see those terrifying ghosts. However, this ability brought her no luck. At 13, she was sold by her mother to a local ghost hunting agency to earn some money, completely disregarding the risks of harm or death to her daughter. Although the girl did not want this job, she could not persuade her mother to change her mind. Thus, she got her first job in life. Relying on her own talent, Lucy quickly integrated into this ghost hunting team, and her brave spirit was recognized by everyone. In this way, Lucy became a top talent at the detective agency. Yet, her ambitions were greater. Lucy wanted to go to a larger place to develop and become the most famous ghost hunter in the country. Unfortunately, her current skills were not enough. That day, the president of the detective agency, Jacob, received a case and quickly sent his staff to a factory. Initially, they thought it was a simple task, but Lucy sensed that something was off. This ghost was very different from the usual ones. However, her companions decided to chase after it, even asking Lucy to go outside to report to the president for assistance. When Lucy went outside, she suggested that everyone evacuate because the spirits inside were not normal. But Jacob ignored Lucy's warning. He refused to allow everyone to evacuate, leaving her no choice but to return to the factory. However, only her friend Nori was standing at the gate. When Lucy pulled her out, the others had already been consumed by a group of demons inside. At that moment, Nori also transformed into a soulless being with hollow gray eyes. When Lucy called for help from Jacob, she was shocked to find that he had chosen to run away instead. Although Jacob was later taken to court, he shifted all the blame onto Lucy. After returning home, her mother still would not let Lucy leave. This time, however, Lucy chose to resist. She told her mother how poorly she had been treated since childhood. Even when she earned some money, Lucy was not respected. Her mother was indeed a cold, unfeeling person, more so than the dead. In response, her mother slapped Lucy painfully, and that slap made Lucy fully understand her mother's true nature. So Lucy ran away from home before dawn, taking her own equipment and leaving the small town behind. On her journey, Lucy looked into various job advertisements for detective agencies. Eventually, she made her way to London, but the truth was that an inexperienced girl would face obstacles at every turn in that full of temptation city. When Lucy arrived at the restaurant, she had only a small amount of money left. However, there was a recruitment advertisement still in her wallet, which was her last hope in this big city. Soon, Lucy found the place and rang the doorbell. Finally, she had the opportunity for an interview, but what she didn't expect was that the owner was a teenager named Lockwood. To test Lucy's abilities, he presented her with a ghost container, and she impressed him by articulating her knowledge about the item. This way, Lucy successfully joined the Lockwood Detective Agency. Although the salary wasn't much, it at least solved her living situation. Shortly after, they received a request from a client. When the two of them arrived and rang the doorbell, a shadow appeared inside the house. They initially thought it was the homeowner, but unexpectedly, she appeared from behind. The woman explained that since her husband passed away, she had never entered the house because a malevolent spirit was haunting it. Now, she planned to sell the house and needed Lockwood to resolve the issue. After receiving the key, Lockwood and Lucy quickly entered. Lucy showcased her talent for sensing the presence of ghosts, and suddenly she felt someone fall down the stairs. Lockwood also saw a figure lying on the staircase. Thanks to their psychic abilities, the two concluded that the ghost was certainly the woman's deceased husband, and the one who pushed him down the stairs might be the actual demon. After that, the two of them went upstairs, where a female ghost appeared before them. Lucy closed her eyes again to use her psychic abilities, and as a result, she felt a pain she had never experienced before. The next moment, the female ghost lunged at her, causing Lucy to nearly fall down the stairs. Fortunately, Lockwood quickly drove the ghost away and managed to pull her back up just in time. They then moved to a room where Lucy formed a circle on the floor using iron powder to ward off spirits. They dug into the wall, suspecting the source of the ghost was inside. However, Lockwood accidentally broke the protective circle. Just as Lucy was trying to fix it, the ghost appeared behind the door, while Lockwood finished digging through the wall. In their haste, they both fell to the floor, and the ghost took the opportunity to approach Lockwood. Seeing this, Lucy threw a salt bomb at the female ghost, but it accidentally created a shower of sparks, igniting a fire. At the same time, they discovered a corpse within the wall, which was the source of the female ghost. In that moment, the ghost lunged toward Lucy, and she quickly covered herself with a silver net over the corpse, causing the ghost to disappear. With the house on the brink of being engulfed in flames, they needed to escape, but before leaving, Lucy pulled a ring off the corpse's finger. Then, Lucy and Lockwood decided to jump off the balcony. In her daze, Lucy saw the woman saying that let her go. When she finally woke up after jumping down, an ambulance had arrived. Thus, Lucy was taken to the hospital. Once she felt better, she secretly left her hospital room, but the moment she opened the door, the sight before her terrified her. The people lying there were all in a vegetative state, their eyes vacant as if they had no souls. The reason was that their spirits had been possessed by demons. Meanwhile, Lockwood was also invited to the Department of Paranormal Research and Control because he had caused an accident during the exorcism that resulted in the house fire. As a result, he received a substantial compensation request from his client. Lucy returned home and accidentally spotted a newspaper on the table. The woman in the article was the ghost she had encountered. According to her friend George, the woman was a famous star in the 1980s but had suddenly vanished from the public eye. No one knew she had been left behind in the wall. After returning to her room, Lucy took out the ring from the woman. She sensed the story behind it through her abilities, clearly visualizing what the woman looked like and feeling that the woman was seeking her help. Unconsciously, Lucy lay on her bed and dozed off. As the ring slipped from her hand and fell to the floor, a strange scene began to unfold. A hand reached out from beneath and the female ghost appeared. She slowly floated above Lucy, staring intently at her. When Lucy opened her eyes, she showed no fear and said that if the ghost harmed her, she wouldn't be able to help. However, the ghost remained angry, forcing Lucy to flee from the room. Lucy called for Lockwood and George to help catch the ghost, but when they arrived at her room, they found no trace of the spirit. Suddenly, Lucy noticed the ghost appearing behind George. Just as the ghost lunged at him, Lockwood threw a chain at it, and Lucy tossed her salt bomb at the ghost. The female spirit suddenly vanished, but in an instant, she reappeared behind Lucy. After another disappearance, the ghost materialized in a different spot. This time, the three of them decided to coordinate their efforts. Together, they managed to make the ghost disappear, leaving only the original ring behind. They decided to seal it in a glass box. When Lockwood suggested destroying the ring, Lucy firmly opposed. She believed that the star Annabelle had been trapped in the wall, undiscovered for over 40 years, and wanted to help the ghost find justice. Her proposal was supported by her friend George, who agreed to assist in solving this mysterious case that had lingered for over 4 decades. Lucy held the ring in her hand and attempted to establish a psychic connection with the female ghost. However, her face immediately contorted in pain. Seeing this, George quickly opened the curtains to let in some light. Suddenly, a chair was blown away, and explosions erupted in the study. Afterward, Lucy told Lockwood that she had seen the truth. Annabelle was choked to death by the one she loved out of jealousy. Lockwood then placed the ring into a pendant sealed within the glass box. He stated that he would no longer take on cases that involved such reckless behavior, as no one could help him repay a debt this large. He then showed Lucy and George the compensation notice from the client. At that moment, a phone rang outside. Lockwood thought they might have a new client, but it turned out to be a man named Barnes from the Department of Paranormal Research and Control, who demanded that Lockwood fire Lucy immediately. They didn't want any negative news stemming from Lockwood's failure and pointed out that he had hired a detective who didn't meet their standards. However, Lockwood was not one to give up easily. After hanging up the phone, he immediately devised a new plan. The group then set out for the library. With the information they gathered, they identified a man named Hugo as the likely killer of Annabelle. If they could solve a case that even the police couldn't crack, it would not only enhance the reputation of their detective agency, but could also help them repay the compensation to their client. Lockwood reported the findings about Annabelle's cause of death through the media, but Lucy was furious about this. If her name was exposed by the press, she would lose her job, and her greatest fear was having to return to her terrifying home. Understanding Lucy's anxiety, Lockwood sincerely apologized. He promised that Lucy could stay in his detective office forever. Meanwhile, when George was at home, he accidentally discovered that the front door had been left open. Suddenly, a man in black appeared behind him and covered his mouth. When Lucy and Lockwood returned, they realized the entrance to the house had been locked from the inside. They had no choice but to climb through a window to get inside. As Lockwood quietly opened the door, he saw the man in black searching for something in the house. He turned back to Lucy and said he would deal with the intruder while she rescued George. After that, the two of them stepped outside, with Lockwood planning to hold the man in black while Lucy went to the storage room. There, she found George tied up. After freeing him, the group regrouped to confront the intruder. Realizing the situation was worsening, he chose to flee by jumping out of the window. When they returned to the storage room, they discovered that Annabelle's ring had been stolen. That ring was the only piece of evidence to identify the murderer. Unexpectedly, Lucy pulled the pendant with the ring from around her neck. It turned out that she had secretly kept it, fearing Lockwood would destroy it. This decision avoided an unnecessary risk. At that moment, Lockwood saw an advertisement in the newspaper looking for detectives to investigate extremely dangerous paranormal events, offering a substantial reward. This was a great opportunity for the Lockwood Detective Agency to turn things around, not only to pay off their debts, but also to enhance their capabilities. They then met with a a client named John on the top floor of the building. John explained that he owned a mansion and was eager to sell it, but there were a stubborn group of malevolent spirits inside. This task of exorcising the dangers needed to be resolved quickly. However, John had many long-standing connections, so he was determined to find a larger detective agency to collaborate with. However, John seemed to be waiting for Lockwood to offer him a lower price. Eventually, both sides agreed to collaborate. Lockwood's team would exorcise the spirits, and John would pay off their debts. Upon returning home, they began researching information about the mansion. George discovered that it was not only a villa, but also a small monastery for medieval devil worshippers. The next day, the group headed to John's mansion. As soon as they stepped inside, Lucy immediately sensed that something was off. Then John's assistant, Ellie, confiscated the flare bomb from their toolkit, as per their agreement that no explosive devices were allowed on the premises. After John and his assistant left, Lockwood retrieved the flare bomb he had hidden outside earlier. It could save their lives at a critical moment. Unbeknownst to them, people from the Department of Paranormal Research and Control were attempting to break down their door. Meanwhile, Lockwood's team entered a suspicious room in the mansion. George quickly spread iron powder across the door and blocked it with a heavy iron block to secure their entrance. Lucy formed a defensive circle with chains in the middle of the room. At that moment, they noticed blood beginning to drip from the ceiling. When the blood fell onto their defensive circle, they realized the evil spirits here were extraordinary. Just as they wanted to run outside, the door suddenly slammed shut and a lot of blood flowed down the walls. Fortunately, Lucy found a door behind the wallpaper. As the blood approached them, she broke the door open to help everyone escape. At this point, George expressed doubts about the terrifying scene they had just witnessed. Why had the escape he arranged failed? Clearly, the spirits couldn't move the heavy iron block at the door. There were many signs suggesting that this was caused by a human. However, they didn't have time to consider these issues. The most important thing for them was to escape. The three of them then followed the stairs down to a mysterious underground space. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed from behind. When the group shined their flashlights toward the stairs, several dark figures appeared, slowly descending. The shadows gradually transformed into black smoke, quickly becoming a demon. Soon, many more dark figures emerged. At this critical moment, Lucy's eyes suddenly turned gray, and the iron sword in her hand fell to the ground. She stood on the edge of an ancient well, as if she wanted to jump in. Just as Lucy leaned forward, her teammates managed to pull her back in time. At that moment, Lucy immediately regained consciousness and said that beneath the well lay the corpses of the spirits. However, the evil souls were getting closer to them. Lockwood decided to throw the flare bomb down the dry well. After an explosion, their group lost consciousness and fell to the ground. When they opened their eyes again, the evil spirits had vanished. Lockwood then realized this was a trap. He took a photo out of his pocket, revealing that the woman standing next to John was the missing actress, Annabelle. It was possible that John was Annabelle's killer. The ring could be the key to uncovering the truth. John had hired them to let the evil spirits in the house kill them. The group quickly crawled out of the basement, but before they could exit, they were confronted by John and his assistant Ellie in the foyer. At that moment, John admitted to everyone that he had killed Annabelle and hidden her body in the wall. The man in black who broke into their house to steal the ring was actually his assistant, Ellie. After saying this, John threatened Lockwood, demanding that he hand over the ring. Lockwood replied that he was not wearing it. Just as John aimed his gun at him, Lucy stood up immediately, removing the necklace and taking the ring out of the pendant. Then, Lucy threw the ring into the air, and at that moment, the ghost of Annabelle appeared before everyone. Facing her killer, she was filled with rage and possessed John's body. John's body immediately emitted a bright light and he died on the spot. After taking her revenge, Annabelle's anger dissipated. Lockwood picked up the ring, causing the ghost to vanish. Just as the group prepared to leave, members of the Department of Paranormal Research and Control rushed in. Lucy's team was captured and confined in a vehicle. John's death drew the attention of higher management, and after signing a confidentiality agreement, they were released and compensated. The department stated to the media that John's death was due to natural causes, ensuring that Lockwood's team's name was not mentioned. However, from this event, Lucy received her Level 4 detective certification. When she went downstairs to put away the certificate, she accidentally opened a cursed lock. Suddenly, Lucy felt unsteady, fear evident on her face. By the time Lockwood and George noticed, she had already fainted. When morning came, Lucy woke up after a 14-hour sleep, unaware of what had happened before she passed out. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The two visitors were grave excavators and cleaners. According to the request from the Department of Paranormal Research and Control, they needed to assess cemeteries for potentially hazardous graves. Recently, they had discovered a secret tomb that was previously unknown. Two people reported feeling extremely nauseous whenever they approached it, with severe cases leading to fainting. fainting. They sought Lockwood's team's assistance in excavating the tomb. That night, the group went to the cemetery. Although Lockwood had psychic abilities, he could not sense the spirits of the dead this time. Lucy only felt slightly dizzy when using her own psychic powers. They then took out chains and surrounded the tomb, with Lucy setting up temperature gauge within the circle. As George stepped into the defensive perimeter and prepared to dig up the coffin, Lucy suddenly felt very dizzy and nauseous. When George cleared the dirt from the coffin, they realized it was actually made of iron. Lockwood quickly pulled George back outside. At the same time, Lucy heard the sound of flies buzzing around her ears. They needed to open the coffin and seal the circle, because if anything inside escaped, it would cause serious trouble. Afterward, Lockwood and George cleared away the dust and discovered that what was buried beneath was not a coffin, but an iron box. When George used force to open the iron door, Lockwood jumped forward with his sword. Inside lay a skeleton holding a strange plate, which seemed to contain something swirling within it. At that moment, George appeared entranced, his eyes unfocused. Fortunately, Lockwood managed to push George away from the tomb just in time. He shouted to Lucy to quickly seal the entity. When Lucy threw the silver net over the skeleton, the group breathed a sigh of relief, but they still felt something strange about this skeleton. The corpse had been shot in the head, and the mirror it held was also peculiar. After Lockwood's team finished their work, the grave diggers arrived. At that moment, a nearby tombstone caught Lucy's attention. As she approached the tombstone, the skull engraved on it reminded her of the scene she had seen before fainting, where the ghost had repeatedly called her name. Meanwhile, Lockwood noticed George crossing the defensive chain, but no one realized that temperature gauge was beginning to drop. Suddenly, George slipped and fell into a pit. He quickly climbed out, but inadvertently got caught in the net covering the skeleton. Soon after, a black mist appeared, filling the cemetery with a gloomy wind. As the black mist coalesced, an evil spirit emerged before them. In the fierce wind, Lucy drew her sword and charged forward, throwing the iron sword at the ghost, which sparked upon contact. Finally, George quickly covered the skeleton with the silver net, causing it to disappear. Fortunately, no one was harmed, and Lucy's bravery saved everyone. After returning home, she immediately went down to the basement to unlock Cursed Jar. Lucy was taken aback when the skull in the jar began to speak to her. This meant that the spirit within the jar was a high-level ghost. It claimed that Lockwood was hiding a secret and even offered to teach Lucy, which panicked her, prompting her to seal the jar shut. When she told her two friends about this, they didn't believe her. After all, there were only a few Type 3 spirits in the supernatural world, and only one person before Lucy had been able to communicate with ghosts. This lack of belief deeply hurt Lucy. Not long after, Lockwood visited Lucy's room and told her that he believed her. He promised to provide her with the greatest support. Lockwood's faith touched Lucy's heart, and tears of emotion welled up in her eyes. Just as the two of them wanted to share the truth with George, he had vanished, leaving only a note on the table. It turned out that George had deciphered the writing on the mirror in the coffin and had gone to the crime scene to see the mirror. To their surprise, Barnes was also there. According to him, the mirror had been stolen, so he had hired a team from another detective agency to handle the case. At that moment, Lockwood and Lucy arrived as well. Analyzing the situation, it was clear that their team was a better fit for the case, but Barnes looked down on this small detective agency. Therefore, he insisted that both teams work together to solve the mystery. The leaders of the two teams agreed to work together, but then they made a bet. Whoever found the mirror first would be the winner, and the losing team would have to give up being detectives forever. Yesterday, Lockwood's team had unearthed a body, but the strange mirror among the burial goods had been stolen by grave robbers. Lockwood wagered with the rival detective team from Plumwood Keep that if his team didn't find the mirror before them, they would have to quit. So, they began searching for clues from where the body was found. George discovered a badge from another detective agency next to the corpse, raising the question of whether a colleague had stolen the mirror. Meanwhile, Lucy's team went to the riverside, where they found a strange corpse in the water. The body had no external wounds, but both eyes had turned black. Lockwood recognized that the man was his colleague and immediately reported the situation to the Department of Paranormal Research and Control, but they still couldn't find the stolen mirror in the river. Lucy's team then decided to split up. George went to the archives to search for information about the mirror, while Lockwood and Lucy would investigate details about the deceased. They agreed to meet back at home in the evening. As Lockwood led Lucy to a river, she suddenly heard a sound nearby. Following the noise, she saw a small glimmer of light. As Lucy approached, she realized it was the ghost of a child. When she bent down for a closer look, the ghost let out a loud scream. Suddenly, a female spirit peered under the water and lunged at Lucy, but just as it was about to grab her, it vanished. Lockwood quickly helped Lucy back to her feet. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind them, a black girl named Bonnie, the very person Lockwood had been searching for. Bonnie was the the most skilled relic hunter on the Thames, surviving by excavating the remains of the dead. She was the one who had saved Lucy by using a silver net to cover a pile of bones, which turned out to be the spirit of the female ghost they had encountered. Afterward, they went to a cafe to talk. Lockwood shared information about the deceased, who was also Bonnie's friend. From her, they learned that the deceased had a friend named Jack. If they left a message on the cafe's bulletin board, Jack would appear. So, Lockwood wrote a note on the board. Bonnie mentioned that her friend had connections with an antique dealer named Winkman. Whenever valuable items were stolen, Jack would meet Winkman to handle the stolen goods. To thank Bonnie for the information, Lockwood gifted her the badge of the deceased as a keepsake. On the way home, Lockwood came up with a plan. They arrived at the antique shop's warehouse. When they saw no one around, Lockwood picked the lock to the warehouse door. However, as soon as they entered, Lucy felt a strong sense of foreboding. She couldn't use her psychic abilities to sense where the mirror might be hidden, because the warehouse was filled with various relics, each imbued with supernatural energy. Lucy sensed the weight of the tragic stories behind them. Just then, a boy stepped out of the house, prompting Lucy to hide. Meanwhile, Lockwood was trying to question the boy about the mirror. Unexpectedly, the boy's mother emerged from the house and electrocuted Lockwood, telling her son to go fetch his father. Lucy, seeing Lockwood incapacitated, felt helpless. When Lockwood opened his eyes, he found himself tied to a chair, facing a man, Winkman. Clearly, Winkman knew why Lockwood was there, but was unaware that Lockwood had a partner. Meanwhile, Lucy was searching the warehouse when she suddenly heard a strange noise. Following the sound, she approached a cabinet and placed her hand on it, realizing that the mirror they were searching for was inside. However, the cabinet was locked. Suddenly, the boy reappeared in front of Lucy. She asked him to take her to Lockwood, but the same situation occurred. His mother appeared behind Lucy and electrocuted her. Before she knew it, Lucy was dragged in front of Lockwood. The worst part was that Winkman and his wife had no intention of letting them go. Just as they were about to attack Lockwood, Lucy regained consciousness. She quickly grabbed a bottle of liquor from the table and splashed it on the couple, then pulled out a lighter from her pocket to threaten them. Lucy seized the opportunity to rescue Lockwood, and they both fled the warehouse. Once they escaped, Lucy suddenly remembered the note Lockwood had left at the cafe. Realizing that George might be in danger, they hurried back home and were relieved to find George safe. However, not long after their return, they heard a knock at the door. When Lockwood opened it, a man stumbled in and collapsed on the floor, a knife embedded in his back. This man was Jack, the one they had been searching for. It seemed someone was trying to kill Jack to cover up a crime. Before he died, Jack spoke of the terrifying things the mirror brought with it, and then he breathed his last. Soon after, the police were called to handle Jack's body, but Lockwood noticed a white light on the floor, lingering ominously. The next day, George shared his findings with the team. He revealed that the grave they had excavated belonged to a man named Bicker, a famous doctor who had become obsessed with supernatural phenomena. The lost antique mirror was a masterpiece created by Bicker. As they discussed this, Lucy suddenly heard a voice coming from a corner of the room. She turned to find the ghost named Skull from the jar speaking to her. What struck Lucy as even stranger was that Skull seemed to know about the doctor named Bicker. Skull revealed that he had once been a student of Bicker and knew many secrets about him. He promised to prove this to Lucy, but insisted that they take him back to Bicker's old house. The Lockwood team quickly gathered their equipment and carefully took the jar containing Skull's spirit as they left the house. Upon arriving at Bicker's home, Skull suddenly asked Lucy to stop. He wanted Lockwood and George to enter first, explaining that only Lucy could hear him. He wanted to ensure her safety, otherwise he would be trapped in the jar forever. However, Lucy ignored Skull's request and insisted on entering with him. She told Lockwood and George that if she didn't come out in 15 minutes, something had gone wrong. With that, she stepped into the dark house. Skull informed Lucy that Bicker had a mysterious journal hidden in a secret room. He guided her to the operating room, where something lay beneath. After directing Lucy through a series of actions, a secret door behind the fireplace opened. As she descended the stairs into the hidden room, her flashlight suddenly went out. She had to light a nearby oil lamp. Skull then told Lucy that the journal was on the table. Before long, she found the mysterious journal and tucked it into her bag. Just then, a rush of dark wind swept through the secret room, slamming the door shut. Lockwood and George, unable to wait any longer, entered the house to search for Lucy. At that moment, several ghosts ghosts appeared before Lucy, she immediately sensed that these spirits had once been Bicker's patients, and it was he who had killed them. Lucy quickly grabbed the lamp and ran to the secret room door, pounding on it as the ghosts drew closer. Lockwood and George arrived but struggled to open the door. Fortunately, George discovered the mechanism and managed to pull Lucy out just in time. Right after, Lockwood threw a flare into the secret room, and the group escaped successfully. Once back home, Lockwood noticed a series of black footprints on the ground. Following the tracks, he found Bonnie in a room. She informed him that the antique shop owner would hold an auction that night, and the missing mirror might appear at the auction, which would take place in a warehouse by the river, Bonnie's territory. They arranged to meet later that evening. Meanwhile, George was organizing the notes from Dr. Bicker. From the writings, they learned that Bicker had murdered his own patients to create the mirror, using 7 souls to perform this dark ritual. However, the notes were written in an ancient language that no one could decipher. George then recalled a historian named Joplin who specialized in relics. She had mentioned that one of Bicker's patients had survived and written a confession which could hold the secrets behind these events. That book was located in the Black Library at Fitter. Coincidentally, Lockwood was invited to a gala celebrating the 50th anniversary of Fitter that evening, so they had planned to go in and investigate. That night, Lockwood and Lucy arrived at the Fitter Detective Agency, carrying the drawings that George had given them to the library door. Before long, Lucy and Lockwood found the book they were looking for on the shelf. However, at that moment, someone entered through the door, and the two quickly hid behind the bookshelf. Lockwood, however, had carelessly left a drawing on the table, and he was immediately blocked by a man holding a golden sword. Lockwood quickly used the book to confront him, and with Lucy's help, they managed to escape. However, security personnel outside had sealed off all the exits, so Lockwood led Lucy to a corner of the hallway and pulled the fire alarm. Immediately, a large amount of salt was sprayed out, causing chaos. In the confusion, they successfully escaped. After escaping, they went to the riverbank to meet Bonnie and George. With Bonnie's help, Lockwood and Lucy successfully sneaked into the auction. The strange mirror immediately caught their attention, and it was also what they were trying to retrieve at all costs. At that moment, Lucy lit a flare in her hand and threw it onto the stage, creating chaos. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lockwood grabbed the mirror. The two then followed the crowd out of the warehouse. Once they reached the rooftop, Lucy threw the mirror strongly to where George and Bonnie were waiting. After successfully retrieving the mirror, they left the scene and jumped from the rooftop into the river to escape. The original plan was for George to take the mirror to the Department of Paranormal Research and Control for destruction after retrieving it. However, unexpectedly, George did not follow the plan and instead called Joplin to investigate the mirror further. Meanwhile, Lockwood and Lucy were waiting at home for George's return. While they waited, they looked through the information about the mirror from the memoir they had obtained at the library, which surprised them. It revealed that anyone who looked into the mirror would be cursed, compelled to continue gazing at it. When Lucy examined the description of the mirror in the book, she found a similar design on the table. As they cleaned off the table, they discovered many similar images. At that moment, they realized George might have been cursed. Lucy then asked Skull to find out what was happening, and he told her that George had likely taken the mirror to its owner. Hearing this, they realized he must have gone to the cemetery. Meanwhile, George and Joplin had arrived at the morgue beneath the cemetery church. Initially, they were the only two to see the strange antique mirror together. However, not long after, George and Joplin heard movement behind them. When George stepped forward with a lantern, he saw it was the man, namely Keep, but something clearly seemed off. Then, Keep was so frightened by the ghost that he fell to the ground. George quickly ran over, using the sword in his hand to drive the ghost away. However, Keep seemed to have lost his courage since he couldn't see the ghost anymore, and he threatened George not to speak of what had happened. Just then, Joplin pressed a knife against Keep's waist. Meanwhile, Lucy and Lockwood had arrived outside and discovered that the skeleton in the iron coffin had disappeared. At that moment, a group of detectives showed up. As they stepped outside, they saw Winkman's men had come to the cemetery. Since Lockwood had caused a scene at the auction, Winkman wanted to retrieve the mirror, and these men would surely not give up easily. In this situation, Lucy decided to go alone to save the people. Lockwood and the others would stay behind to fend off the artifact hunters. Joplin then tied Keep to a chair and prepared to uncover the secrets of the antique mirror. The legend said that only the clever could see the supernatural phenomena within, but upon realizing that Keep had lost his powers, Joplin kicked him to the floor. George suddenly realized that Joplin had wanted to know the mirror's secret from the start. She had hired a grave robber to obtain the antique mirror and had later killed that grave robber herself. Now, it was too late for George to grasp this. Joplin was simply exploiting her obsession with the study of ghosts. She wanted wanted George to help uncover the secret of the mirror. When Lucy arrived, she found George tied to a chair. At that moment, a red light flashed behind Lucy. Slowly turning around, she realized a giant ghost had appeared before her. As Lucy turned to run, Joplin's dagger was already at her throat. In response, she used her special psychic powers to communicate with Joplin, demanding that she release George, offering to take his place in the experiment with the mirror. Eventually, Joplin agreed to Lucy's request. Lucy then warned George not to look into the mirror, no matter what happened, because anyone who did would die. Joplin took out a recording device to document everything that was about to happen. She pulled back the silver net and, immediately, a beam of light shot out from the mirror. At that moment, Lucy turned her head away and lifted Skull's spirit toward the mirror. Skull became very frightened, telling Lucy that something in the mirror had changed, that he saw something trapped inside. Next, horrifying images flashed in Lucy's mind, causing her to faint. Seeing this, George rushed forward and knocked over the supporting shelf, causing the mirror to fall and shatter. While George tried to revive Lucy, Joplin picked up the broken mirror pieces. Suddenly, the mirror emitted a white light that shone directly into her face, causing her entire body to glow until it exploded. The mirror was finally completely shattered, and the souls trapped within it burst forth from the broken glass. Gradually, the ghosts disappeared into the air. Just as Lucy and George rejoiced over the freed souls, a terrifying voice appeared beside them. It was a giant evil spirit right next to them. As it approached, the two lost their ability to move. When it opened its mouth, ready to swallow their souls, Lockwood appeared and threw his iron sword at the evil spirit. Next, bombs were continuously thrown, creating an opportunity for Lucy and George to escape. Taking advantage of that, Lucy picked up the silver net and covered the skeleton to resolve the situation. In this way, the group finally succeeded in escaping the death trap. The movie ended here. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.